The orbital station Ether 9 floated in the endless dark, spinning slowly like a giant silver ring. From a distance, it looked quiet, almost asleep, but inside, humans moved through bright corridors, their boots clicking on the metal floors. Machines hummed softly, lights blinked, and the distant stars glowed outside the wide glass windows. Far from the busy sections, where the air felt cooler and the lights were dimmer, Celira waited in silence. She was not human. She belonged to a race the galaxy whispered about, but never saw. Unseen, Celira stood in a small storage bay between two levels of the station. It was a place most humans never entered. Her body shimmered faintly, but only if someone looked at exactly the right angle. Even then, their eyes would slide away, unable to focus. That was her kind's greatest gift, to exist without being noticed. Her species moved between layers of reality, half here, half somewhere else. They had learned to pass through ships, cities, even battlefields without ever being detected. They didn't need weapons. They didn't need armies. They survived because no one could even prove they were real. Celira loved watching humans. They were noisy, always rushing, always building things they barely understood. They fought each other sometimes. They made mistakes. But they were also curious, more curious than most species she had observed. And their technology grew fast. Too fast, some of the unseen whispered. But Celira wasn't worried. Humans can build all they want, she often thought. They will never see us. Tonight tore what the humans called night. She observed a young engineer named Daniel Rios. He worked late almost every cycle. She liked watching him. He talked to himself while repairing machines, sang little songs, and sometimes told jokes to the blinking lights on the control panels. He never noticed the soft ripple of air near the corner where she stood. Invisible. Daniel was fixing a gravitic relay, one of the station's delicate systems that kept the artificial gravity steady. His hair was slightly messy, his uniform rolled up at the sleeves, and there was a faint smudge of oil on his cheek. He wasn't like the officers who moved with stiff shoulders and serious faces. He smiled easily, even when he worked alone. Celira crouched low, her long fingers resting against the cool metal floor. Her kind didn't speak out loud like humans. Their communication was silent, through subtle signals of thought and light. But she whispered to herself anyway, imitating human behavior. "He cannot see me," she murmured softly. Daniel adjusted the device, humming again. Then something strange happened. His hand froze mid-gesture. His eyes lifted not to the relay, not to the ceiling, but toward her corner. Celira didn't move. She didn't even breathe. Daniel squinted slightly. A small frown touched his face. He reached into his tool bag and pulled out a handheld scanner, something she had seen before but never worried about. Humans built scanners for energy leaks, invisible gases, or phase disturbances. They never worked on the unseen dot, or so she believed. He tapped the side of the device. A soft blue light appeared at its tip, and it made a faint sound like air flowing through a narrow pipe. Daniel pointed it toward her corner. The light passed through the air, rippling gently. Celira's skin prickled. That had never happened before. She leaned back slowly, expecting the ripple to pass through her like always. Instead, the air around her body shimmered. Only for a second, but it was enough. Daniel's eyes widened. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't run. Instead, he whispered, almost gently, "I know you're there." Celira felt a sudden rush of cold in her chest. That was impossible. He couldn't see her. No one ever had. Her entire species depended on this rule. She pulled back into the wall, slipping partly out of phase. Her form blurred until she felt the air move through her arms. She moved quietly, gliding across the room without a sound. But when she turned to look, Daniel had already moved too fast and steady. He didn't look confused or scared. He looked certain. "Not bad," he muttered to himself, almost like he was solving a puzzle. Celira's mind raced. Has he been watching me too? How? She had entered this station weeks ago. No one had noticed. She had walked past officers, guards, and engineers without a single glance. She had stood in crowded halls and never once felt the sharp weight of someone's gaze. But Daniel's eyes felt like a bright light in the dark. He didn't just look near her. He looked at her. The unseen had a rule: never let them know. If a being ever saw them, they vanished. No explanations. No contact. They simply left and never returned. Celera slipped through a maintenance tunnel, letting the cool air wrap around her. Her heartbeat echoed faintly in her ears. She didn't usually feel fear. Her kind were watchers, not fighters. But tonight, something had shifted. She glanced back. Through the small round window in the tunnel's hatch, she saw Daniel standing where she had been. He was adjusting the scanner again, his lips moving in quiet calculation. He's not afraid, she realized. He's curious. That made him dangerous. Celera floated deeper into the station's hidden paths. She knew every secret corridor, every maintenance shaft, every silent space between the walls. The humans thought they designed their station alone, but the unseen had been here long before construction finished. They liked to slip into new human structures, to learn, to listen. Humans were unpredictable, and the unseen liked to stay ahead. She paused near the large glass dome at the edge of the station. Outside, the stars stretched forever, sharp and cold. She had watched 1,000 sunsets from alien skies, but something about human stars felt different. Maybe it was because humans kept reaching for them. Celera thought of Daniel, of the way he had looked through her. Her kind didn't believe in coincidences. If one human could see her, others might follow. And humans were very good at turning a single discovery into 100 new machines. She closed her eyes, letting her thoughts touch the distant mind of her people. No words, just pulses of silent light. "I have been seen," she sent. Far away across the folds of space, reply came a ripple of cool light and slow weight. "Impossible," her kin whispered back. No one sees the unseen, but she had no doubt. She felt it. A human had looked at her. Meanwhile, Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor of the relay chamber, staring at his scanner. It was a device he had built himself. The official station scanners couldn't pick up half the things he wanted to study. Daniel liked to invent. He liked to test impossible ideas. Most of the crew thought he was a little strange. That never bothered him. He adjusted the dial on the scanner and replayed the energy pulse. The recorded wave pattern was odd. There had been a brief disturbance in the era shift, just big enough for the sensor to notice. Not like a leak, not like static. Something else. Finally, he said quietly, "You're real." Daniel had been chasing ghost readings for months. Tiny, irregular spikes that came and went, always at night, always when the station was quiet. Everyone else had said it was just interference from the outer shield generators. But Daniel wasn't convinced. He'd followed the pattern, improved his scanner, and waited. And tonight, he'd found her. Back in the quiet corner of the station, Celera rested against a curved wall. She could hide again, fade deeper into the veil where humans could not follow. But she didn't. Her mind felt restless. Why had Daniel not called security? Why hadn't he sounded alarms? If a human had seen something they didn't understand, they usually gathered more humans, more tools, more noise. But Daniel was silent. He acted like a man solving a personal mystery. Curiosity. That was the dangerous part of humanity. She remembered the stories the elders of the unseen told, the reason they always watched humans carefully. Long ago, when humans were still learning to travel through space, they had found things other species ignored: signals, echoes, patterns hidden in noise. Where others accepted mystery, humans pushed back. They build bridges where others build walls, the elders had said. She understood now. Celera drifted up to a high ventilation, platformed, and looked down at the station below. The humans were sleeping. Their rooms glowed softly with warm lights. She watched the engineers, the guards, the pilots, all unaware of her presence. Except him. She thought of his voice. "I know you're there." Simple words. Soft words. But they had cracked something she thought was unbreakable. For the first time in her long existence, Celera felt seen. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew that the humans would not ignore what Daniel had found. They never did. The air vibrated gently as the station systems switched to night mode. Soft blue lights filled the corridors. Salira closed her eyes and listened to the hum of the machines. She could disappear tonight. She could return to her people and warn them to stay away. But part of her wanted to know more. She wanted to understand why Daniel had built that device, why he wasn't afraid, and deeper still, a thought whispered inside her, if a human can see us, everything will change. Daniel sat at his small work table later that night, carefully taking apart the scanner. It was made from bits of shield emitter coils, an old medical sensor, and some parts he wasn't supposed to have. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to catch something. Someone. He replayed the moment in his head, the faint shimmer in the corner, a tiny spark in the air. That wasn't just interference, he said to himself. You're real, and now I know where to look. The morning cycle began slowly on Ether 9. Pale white light filled the corridors, and the air carried the soft scent of recycled oxygen mixed with faint metal. The human crew moved like a quiet river, engineers with toolkits, security officers with scanners, pilots with mugs of warm drinks. But Daniel Rios wasn't walking with the others. He stood in his small workshop, staring at the strange wave pattern on the screen in front of him. His homemade scanner sat on the table, still faintly glowing. He had spent the night awake, taking it apart and putting it back together again. He had seen something, not just a shadow, a shimmer, a real presence, and now he wanted to see it again. Across the station, hidden between two layers of reality, Salira moved silently. She watched everything from the thin spaces between worlds. She could feel the humans' energy, the hum of their technology, the heartbeat of their machines. But her thoughts were not calm. She'd always been sure of her world. The unseen were safe because they could not be seen. That rule had kept them alive for ages. But Daniel had changed that. He had looked at her with curious eyes, not fear, and that unsettled her more than she liked to admit. I should leave, she thought, for the 100th time. Her people would not forgive her for being careless. They would tell her to disappear, to never return to this station. But when she tried to move toward the exit, she found herself turning back. She wanted to understand how a human had done it. She wanted to understand him. Daniel leaned over the scanner, adjusting a small crystal-like piece at its center. He had added it last night, a stabilizer from an old communication node. If the strange shimmer appeared again, this time the scanner would give him a cleaner reading. He whispered to himself, You're not a ghost. I know you're real. His friend and fellow engineer, Mira, entered the room just then, her brown hair tied up and a datapad under her arm. She raised an eyebrow at him. Daniel, did you even sleep? He blinked at her, half smiling. Not really. You're chasing those invisible ghost spikes again, aren't you? She said, leaning against the door. You know the captain thinks it's just a sensor error. Daniel shook his head. It's not an error. I saw something last night. Myra sighed. She had known Daniel for years. He was brilliant, but he often chased things other people ignored. She didn't laugh at him, though. She just tilted her head, curious. What did you see? I don't know, Daniel admitted, but it saw me too. Mira frowned. Daniel. Be careful, he nodded, but his eyes didn't leave the scanner. He wasn't going to stop. Salira stood at the end of the corridor, watching the two humans from her hidden plane. Mira couldn't sense her. Daniel could. At least, a part of him could. She leaned closer, letting her hand hover near the air between their world and hers. For most species, her world was like a mirror, close, but untouchable. But humans were different. Something about their technology made small ripples in the veil. Maybe they didn't know it, but their inventions brushed against her world like waves against a shore. And Daniel had found a way to feel those waves later that day. Daniel walked through the long observation hallway that circled the station. Outside, stars shone like cold fire. He carried the scanner in his hand, the small light on it blinking softly. He had programmed it to react when the strange energy signature appeared again. Salira followed him silently, drifting like a shadow just outside his perception. She could have stayed fully hidden, but something inside her wanted to test him to see if he really could find her again. She moved closer. The air near him shifted slightly. The light on the scanner blinked brighter. Daniel stopped walking. He slowly turned to his left, exactly where she floated in the thin air. His heart beat faster, not in fear, but in excitement. "I know you're there again," he whispered softly. Celira froze. She could have left. She could have faded away completely. But she didn't. Instead, she shifted a tiny bit into his world. Only a shimmer. Only a soft outline. Daniel's breath caught. There it was again, the faint shape, like heat over a desert road. This time it wasn't a trick of light. This time he was sure. "I can see you," he said quietly. Celira tilted her head, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. No screaming. No alarm. Just calm curiosity. "Who are you?" Daniel asked gently. She didn't answer. She couldn't, not the way humans spoke. But something strange happened. His scanner picked up the pulse of her thoughts. A soft vibration passed between them like a whisper of light. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he felt something watching. Hidden. Secret. His eyes widened. "You're not just light. You're alive." She faded back a little, uncertain. No human had ever spoken directly to her before. The distance between their worlds had always been unbreakable. Until now, Daniel spent the next few days trying to understand. He worked quietly, without telling anyone except Mira. He didn't want the station's command to interfere. They would call the military, scientists, diplomats. They would turn it into something he couldn't control. But for Daniel, this wasn't about control. It was about connection. He began carrying the scanner with him everywhere, tuning it carefully. Every time the shimmer appeared, he learned a little more. The frequency. The temperature shift. The slight delay between her presence and his reading. It became like a silent game between the two of them. Celira would appear near the edges of the station, sometimes in the observation hall, sometimes in the quiet maintenance tunnels. Always at night, when no one else was watching. She never spoke, but her silence said a lot, and Daniel always found her. One night, Daniel sat on the floor of a narrow maintenance room. He placed the scanner in front of him and switched off the lights. The air was cool, the hum of machines soft and distant. He knew she was nearby. "Whoever you are," he said softly, "I won't hurt you." Celira watched him from the other side of the veil. His voice was steady. His eyes didn't carry the cold hunger for power she had seen in some other species. There was no fear either. Just honest curiosity. She remembered how the elders of her kind spoke of humans. "They are builders," they said. "They reach into places others do not. If they ever find us, our world will no longer be ours." But instead, she reached out her hand. Her fingers passed through the veil. For the first time in her life, she touched something in the human world. Not hard, not solid, but real enough to make the air tremble. Daniel felt a soft brush of cold wind against his skin. Though the room was sealed, he smiled faintly. "You're real," he whispered, back in the hidden plane. Celira felt something she had never felt before, small warmth, like light breaking through fog. She had always watched humans from afar, seeing their chaos and ambition. But she had never felt seen in return. Daniel didn't just look at her. He acknowledged her. For the unseen, that was both dangerous and strange. Her people would say he was a threat. But a small part of her didn't believe that. She didn't sense danger in him. Only wondered the next day. Daniel met Mira in the observation dome. She was holding her datapad, reading something, but stopped when she saw his face. "You look like you just discovered something huge," she said. Daniel grinned. "I did." Mira crossed her arms. "Daniel, if this is another ghost story, I swear it's not," he said quickly. "She's real," Mira blinked. He hesitated. "I think it's someone, not human, but someone." Myra slowly lowered her datapad. She had seen that look in his eyes before, the look he got when he was right about something impossible. "Okay," she said softly. "Show me." That night, Celira returned to the observation dome. The stars shone brighter than usual. The humans had dimmed the interior lights, and the glass stretched out like a black ocean. Daniel stood at the edge, holding his scanner loosely. Mira stood a few steps behind, curious but nervous. Celira hesitated. Showing herself to one human had already been dangerous. But showing herself to two? That could change everything. But something inside her whispered, he trusts her. She stepped closer. The scanner blinked rapidly. Daniel turned, meeting her invisible gaze. Mira gasped softly. She couldn't see Celira clearly, only a shimmer in the air, like a figure made of light and mist. Daniel smiled gently. She's here, Mira whispered. What is she? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. But she's been here a long time. On the other side, Celira studied Mira carefully. This human's reaction was different. Her energy was sharp, uncertain, but not hostile. Celira tilted her head and let a soft pulse travel through the aerowave of calm. Something her species used to communicate safety. Mira shivered as the air around her softened. I felt that, she whispered, like a breeze. Daniel nodded. She can communicate. Not with words, but something else. For a moment, all three stood in silence. A human man, a human woman, and a being from another plane, sharing the same space between stars. That night after Mira left, Daniel sat alone in the dome with Celira's faint form still nearby. He looked out at the stars and whispered, You've been watching us, haven't you? Celira didn't answer with words. But Daniel felt something in the air pulse, like the beat of a distant drum. In his mind, he heard faint feelings, not language, long time, watching, waiting. He smiled softly, and now we see each other. In her hidden world, Celira floated with quiet thoughts. She had broken the old rule of her people. She had let herself be seen, and yet she didn't. The station Ether 9 floated in silent space, a silver ring glowing softly under the light of distant stars. But inside, quiet changes were already taking shape. For many years, the unseen had watched humanity without fear. They were ghosts, slipping through worlds without ever leaving a trace. But one human, Daniel Rios, had done something no one ever had. He had seen one of them, and now, nothing would ever be the same. Daniel leaned over his workstation in the dimly lit engineering bay. The soft hum of machinery filled the air. His scanner, his small, hand-built device, lay on the table, glowing faintly. He touched it carefully, almost with affection, like someone holding a secret that the world was not ready to hear. He whispered to himself, She's real, and I'm not crazy. For the past few weeks he had met Celira, the unseen watcher. She had never spoken with words, but her quiet presence, her shimmering outline, and the strange pulses in the air had said more than language ever could. They had built something fragile. Something new. A connection between two worlds that had always been separate, but Daniel knew one thing for sure. Secrets never stayed. Secrets for long on a human station. Celira hovered between the thin layers of reality near the engineering deck. She had watched Daniel for many cycles now. She had felt his curiosity, his wonder, and his courage. It made her heart ache in a way she had never experienced before. She had broken the rules of her kind by letting him see her. She had shown herself not just once but many times, and now her people would feel her absence. They would come. They will not understand him, she thought. They will see only danger. She looked at Daniel, who was tinkering with the scanner again. His face was focused, but there was something soft in his eyes. Hope. He was building something new, something bigger than the old device. He didn't want to hide this forever. He wanted the world to know. The first sign came quietly. A soft tremor passed through the thin layer of space where Celira stood. It wasn't from the station. It came from her world. A soft wave of energy brushed against her mind, sharp and cold. They are coming. Her kind had felt what she had done. The veil between their worlds was no longer still. She could sense several other unseen moving closer through the hidden pathways that wrapped around the galaxy like threads. They will erase the bridge I made, she thought. They will make him forget me. Her fingers tightened in the air, though she could not truly hold anything. For the first time in her long existence, she did not want to disappear. Meanwhile, Daniel sat with Mira in the observation dome, where it had all begun. The stars stretched endlessly outside the glass, silent and cold. The scanner rested between them, its small light blinking in a steady rhythm. "You really believe she's someone?" Mira asked softly. "I don't just believe it," Daniel said. "I know it. I've talked to her. Not with words, but I've felt her. She's been here for a long time, watching us." Myra's hands tightened around her datapad. "Daniel, this is bigger than us." "If the captain finds out, he'll tell command," Daniel finished, "and they'll turn this into something it shouldn't be. But we can't just ignore it, Mira. She's proof that we're not alone." Mira sighed. She had always trusted Daniel, even when he chased impossible dreams. And now, looking at the shimmer in his eyes, she knew he wasn't wrong. She whispered, "Then what are you going to do?" Daniel looked out at the stars. "I'm going to make sure they know we see them too." Solera stood just beyond the dome, watching the two humans. Her presence was like a faint ripple against the glass. She felt torn between two worlds, the silent one she belonged to, and the noisy, bright one she had grown curious about. Then, she felt it again. The ripple in the veil grew stronger. A shape formed behind her. Another unseen had arrived. The figure shimmered like water-bending light. It was tall, with long, flowing limbs. And its voice came not through sound, but through pulses in the air. "You broke the silence," the voice said. Solera lowered her gaze. "Yes, they must not know we are here. But they already do," she whispered through thought. "One of them saw me." "Then he must forget," the voice replied coldly. Solera's chest tightened. Her kind believed in safety through invisibility. No one was allowed to be seen. No one was allowed to speak to outsiders. That rule had protected them for centuries. But Daniel had not attacked her. He had not tried to harm her. He had only wanted to understand. "He is different," she said. The figure's pulse was sharp. "Humans are dangerous. They build. They search. If they know we exist, they will follow us. They will find us." "Maybe they should," Solera answered quietly. The figure's form flickered. Shock. Disbelief. "You speak like them," Solera didn't answer. But deep inside, she knew she no longer belonged fully to either side. Daniel felt a sudden shift in the air. A cold pressure pressed against the dome, soft but heavy. The scanner blinked rapidly. "She's here," he whispered. But this time, the light wasn't steady. It was wild, unstable. Mira stepped back. "Daniel, something's different." And then, the shimmer appeared. Not one to Solera stood near the glass. Next to her, another figure, taller and sharper in outline. Flickered faintly, like water under moonlight. Daniel's breath caught. "There's more of them." The new unseen looked at Daniel through the veil. He could feel something pressing against his mind, not words. Got feelings. Cold. Warning. Distance. Solera moved slightly forward. Daniel didn't need words to understand. She was standing between him and the other one. "They don't want me to know, do they?" Daniel whispered. The scanner trembled in his hand, picking up every flicker in the air. Solera didn't answer. But her form glowed faintly, like light meeting shadow. The other figure sent another sharp pulse through the air, and for a second, Daniel felt dizzy, as if the world itself wanted him to forget. But humans were stubborn creatures. Daniel clenched the scanner and took a deep breath. "No, I'm not letting go." Solera felt the weight of two worlds pressing on her. The unseen had come to silence this connection. But Daniel stood firm, his eyes steady, even against a power he didn't understand. She looked at him and felt something she had never felt before: trust. She turned to the other unseen. "He is not like the others. He is human," the figure replied sharply. "And humans always reach for what they cannot have." Solera's voice grew quiet, but strong. "Maybe this time we should let them." Daniel moved closer to the glass. His voice was calm, steady, clear. "I know you're afraid," he said softly, not sure if they could truly understand his words. "But we don't want to hurt you. We just want to know you." The second unseen pulsed sharply, a wave that made the air shiver. But Daniel didn't step back. He kept his eyes on Celira. "You showed yourself to me," he whispered. "That means something. It means you believed I wouldn't break what we found." Mira watched in silence, her hands tight around the datapad. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she saw it in Daniel's face. He wasn't afraid. He was determined. Celira lifted her hand toward the glass. Slowly, gently. Daniel lifted his hand too. Mirroring her movement, their hands never truly touched. But the scanner went silent, not broken, but calm. The air between them became still. The second unseen paused. For the first time, it seemed unsure. It sent a soft pulse, less sharp this time. A question Daniel didn't know what to say. But Celira did see them. She whispered into the veil. "Don't hide. See them the way they see us, in that silent moment." Something happened that neither world had planned for. The air shimmered like light on water. The veil didn't break, but it thinned. And across the station, faint ripples spread like rings in a pond. Other humans in quiet rooms felt a soft breeze, a strange stillness. They didn't know it yet, but something invisible had shifted. For the first time in history, the unseen didn't retreat. They looked back. Later that night, Daniel sat on the floor of the observation dome, exhausted but alive with wonder. Mira sat beside him, still speechless. "Did that really happen?" she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes, and it's just the beginning." Celira lingered outside the dome, her form softer than before, but still visible to him. She could feel the presence of the others watching, still cautious, still uncertain, but they hadn't erased her connection with him. They had seen humanity. She sent a soft pulse through the era, quiet message only he could feel. "We see you too." In the following days, the station moved on as usual. Most of the crew didn't know anything had changed. They went about their routines, unaware of the silent watchers around them, but Daniel knew. Mira knew, and Celira's people knew. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a grand announcement. It was just a single human and a single unseen, proving that two worlds could look at each other without. Fear Celira returned often to the dome. She no longer hid fully. She didn't step completely into the human world, but she allowed herself to be seen in the quiet hours when no one else was around. Daniel didn't push her for answers. He didn't demand anything. He just listened to the silence and learned to read the soft language of light and air. In time, a few more unseen appeared in the distance. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to watch him as he had once been watched. They were curious too. Daniel kept building his scanner, making it better, cleaner, more stable. But now, it wasn't to hunt shadows. It was to build a bridge. He whispered to Celira one night. "We don't have to be alone anymore." Celira didn't have a word for friend in her language, but she felt it deep and warm like a quiet star. "Friend," she sent softly.